Hi, everyone. I want to welcome you to our webinar, Product Ops in Practice, Lessons from Pendo's Head of Product, Christine Itwaru. I'm Fanny Lofters, and I'm on the marketing team here at Pendo. Before we get started, I want to go through a few housekeeping items. If you have questions during the webinar, please submit them using the Q&A function. We will attempt to address some of these questions at the end as time allows. We will also be sharing a recording of the webinar via email with anyone who's registered within the next 24 hours. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers. Christine Itwaru is the head of product operations at Pendo, and she joined us last year in 2019. She created the product operations team later that year, and today she'll be sharing insights and advice about getting started with that team and what product ops looks like today for Pendo. Sarah Estes, as some of you may know, has put together some amazing content on product operations. She is Pendo's content marketing manager, and she has worked closely with Christine, monitoring product operations in the market as Christine has grown the team here at Pendo. I'll let you take it from here, Sarah.
Thanks, Fanny. Christine, so excited to be with you here today to talk about product ops. So let's jump right in. When you think about your team today, what are your priorities for your team, and what are you guys focusing on?
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. All right, so if we look at the world today, nobody can dispute that we are in a season of immense change. And we're about 8 weeks here into quarantine for Pendo. We kicked off, a couple of weeks ago, so around 8 weeks. I started taking a harder look at that time around our goals for Q2, which is our Q2 starts in April, and the rest of the year. And so when we transitioned, the most important thing was making sure that my team was healthy. So before setting any goals, that was my priority. I needed to make sure that my then 2 product ops managers were really comfortable working from home and ready to take on the challenge of being remote, because they're super cross-functional. So it's it's a really important thing to keep in mind. We then hired a third person who was transitioning into our team at the time. And a lot was going through my mind with respect to how I can ensure that my current team was successful and this new team member was being set up for success while we built our goals out. And so as a leader of a truly cross-functional team, my success is really hinged upon the ability of my team to execute across Pendo internally. So ultimately, our external customers can get a sense of how aligned and armed their reps are, or how armed people are that are speaking to them from Pendo overall. And so priorities for my team today center more around staying close to the revenue teams and to marketing so that we can learn about the biggest issues facing our customers, and at the same time, make sure that we're feeding them with the latest and greatest that's coming out of the product team. That's only strengthening the data that our product managers are already putting out there to them. And so we're always operating with the external customer in mind. So a lot of you on the phone. So strengthening the communication between our teams internally and putting more rigor around certain things that we'll talk about a little bit later. It's been front and center for me, and the way we sort of prioritize our goals for this quarter and beyond was driven out of that. We continue to also offer a muscle to our product managers to help them stay focused on both current customer needs and our addressable market, especially given this time.
Yeah, I think what's interesting to point out what you said is the whole idea of working remotely. And I think product ops is such a cross-functional, unit within a company that, especially now when teams are more remote and they're not in the same rooms face-to-face, product ops is even more essential. So I think it's interesting to call that out from what you said. Following up to that, in addition to what your team is focusing on, how would you say product ops is adapting to changes in business needs? Because a lot of companies, are needing to pivot or shift or rethink what their priorities are.
Yeah, lots of businesses have pivoted to survival mode over the last couple months, right, around the world or across the world. And for my team, we knew that retention was going to be of the utmost importance for our customer success teams internally. And then equally so, we knew that we would see a spike in support asks or help from the sales team. Again, truly cross-functional. That's what our team is doing, is making sure that we're there for everyone. So when it came to strengthening deals or keeping an eye, laser focused, vision on keeping our current customers happy, we were really intentional about making sure that we're stating, hey, we're here for you guys and we're going to figure out how to make this work, and make sure that we're arming you with additional things that will help you in your relationships. And we were correct. And so we just needed to adjust really quickly. And once we got a sentiment that everybody here was healthy and set up for success, that's where we placed our focus, was honing in on the things that we knew were going to help both current customers and then our addressable market. So prioritization was really critical a couple weeks ago, and it's still really critical today, obviously. So I encourage my team to say no to things that don't roll up to the core areas of focus and don't ultimately drive value for our internal customers today. And so, I encourage them to say no with a why behind it often. And that's how we've adapted is, if they need to turn around and say no to something, they should have a why, and they should also have data to back their why, and they should be able to tell a story as to why something else is more important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think something to just call out, you mentioned, putting our customers at the, focusing on our customers. And I think a lot of organizations are experiencing, their needs are all changing. So here's just a snapshot of some of our customers and the product usage they've been seeing over the past months, calling out that for some, they've seen increased usage, some they've seen decreased, but as it relates to product ops, even as things maybe start to level out after a couple of months and return back to normal usage volume, the actions in the product may be different. So the behaviors that your users are taking might be changing because of what's going on. So product ops can really be that team that digs into the data to identify what maybe needs to be shifted to address the customer's needs.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on today for all businesses, right? The saying is that nothing's going to be going back to the same. So it's going to be really interesting to see what changes in all the industries that we serve, and particularly our customers today.
Yeah. So now that we've touched on the current state, I want to kind of jump back to when you started the team last year and how you really got it off the ground and how you got product ops started here at Pendo.
Sure. So Fanny mentioned a little earlier on that I started Pendo last year. So I actually joined to do product operations here at Pendo. I joined as the director of product last January. And one of the things I believe in is making sure that you're making connections across the company. And for a company that was growing as quickly as Pendo, and we're still growing at a crazy rate, it meant for me personally, I needed to find the people and the partners that I could lean on across our company to understand our business and to understand their goals and to understand what their mandate was. And it was because our product team was also growing and maturing. And what I wanted to do was make sure that we gave them some focus, or put some focus around how we can help with retention, how we can help with winning new business, in addition to building really great product and keeping our current customers happy and just winning, right? And so I ended up coming across some challenging items in that time that I was making my connections across the organization. I would say like for the first 3 months or so. I realized quickly that there were certain things that needed some extra love from the product team internally, but they weren't necessarily things that a new feature itself could solve. So it wasn't something that I could say, this would be great PMs. Let's make sure we put some effort towards doing this on Pendo. It was more, how do we get better as a unit internally to help everyone feel really good? So I started testing by where we could be really, just looking at where we could be really impactful when it came to things like internal knowledge base, more technical knowledge, external knowledge base, and it ended up being a full-time job for a woman that's on my team, and she was already managing way more than that while she decided to place more emphasis on it. And so we ended up doing a lot of that, and then testing with building more processes to help the company bring more data to the product team around customers that were potentially at risk or high priority deals that we had in the quarter that we wanted to lift to the product team for visibility. We have several offerings also in our product. So covering ground on all those things required real discipline, lots of process. And again, the company was growing so quickly. So repeating all of it and how to get it done was really important too. And that's something to remind myself of, particularly as we're in this state of work from home today, where I have to make connections a little bit more frequently with folks that are newer or folks that, I've barely gotten to know, so that they understand what we're doing to help them here at Pendo. And so throughout this, though, like one of the things that I talk to you, Sarah, a lot about when we talk about product ops and how it's grown here is we made it very clear that we're here to partner with product managers and to partner with marketing to empower and align across the organization. When I think about the beginning last year, I can remember several times that when calling out that that you're here to partner and the things that you're here to make an impact on was super important, because it helped you also gain trust with multiple players. Again, being super cross-functional. But those are the two groups I feel like you work most tightly with across the org, is your product manager set and your product marketing set. And then also one of the things that stands out for me when I look back is we always reflected, and we now probably do it once or twice a quarter, at least at the end of the quarter. And we course corrected a ton over the last year or so. So we are constantly learning as we grow. And when companies, again, grow so quickly, you have to remember to have an agile mindset. Whether you believe in agile as a discipline or not is one thing, but if you don't have an agile mindset in this space, and you're not open to trying new ways of working to achieve results as one single team, and I mean, not a product team, but like an entire team across your company, you're not setting yourself up for success.
Yeah, totally. And just to call out something that you pointed out, you did mention how, when we were building product ops, we were growing quickly. And I think something that's interesting that we found in some research we did with LinkedIn that took a look at people on LinkedIn with product ops titles is when you looked at the company sizes, yes, of course, maybe the most common was those larger 10,000 plus companies, followed by companies with 5,000 to 10,000. But that third highest bucket was companies with 51 to 200 employees, followed by 11 to 50 employees. So it definitely mirrors, I would say, our experience as a company with product ops, that yes, it can be important and is important for large companies, but it can be especially crucial for companies when they're kind of scaling up and trying to grow, and those processes and the data is just even more valuable at that phase as well.
Yeah.
So as you got started and you had a clear focus on what your team was going to work on, how did you begin to make that impact across the company and drive alignment and establish goals that your team was going to align with?
Yeah, it was no small feat. We started small though, and we were testing in some of the areas I mentioned before, like how do we get better at putting process around knowledge base? How do we get better at more technical training? What about lifting items to the table that are super important in production right now? And we always tried to focus first on minimizing the pain for our customers, both internal and external. And so because of that, I today encourage my product managers to look at the pain and try to find the smallest slice of value. It's similar to product managers for sure, right? And that's my background. I didn't talk a little bit about my background before, but I've been in product for almost 10 years now, and that's the thing that we lean into the most, is solving the pain. So finding something that is painful across your org for your customers and trying to find a way to alleviate some of that pain. That's where we started. And then looking back and reflecting and making sure that you're course correcting. Like I said, you have to be open to failing, especially when you're starting something new, like a new discipline or a new team within your organization. And I think you have a little bit of forgiveness in that time, because people are understanding that you are trying something new and you're also trying to do it for the greater good of the company. So that's something to at least remind people of, right? You're there to help make things better, and you're there to help the company overall. One thing that I found that helped a lot was you have to be able to tell a story and illustrate your why. And I talk about the data. We talk about the data a lot here at Pendo. We're very data focused. There's a saying that the product manager is the CEO of the product, but they don't have the CEO power. That's true for a lot of companies. And there's also now, I look at product operations where because we're so cross-functional, we have to get buy-in really quickly from everybody across the organization in order to execute, because their time is super valuable. And so what we do is we lean into showing folks across the aisle what's in it for them, and painting a picture of what it could look like if they were to start to adopt new processes, or what this data that we have in front of us means for them and their role. So that helped set up our team for success, I would say, and started to get the company more aligned around what we were trying to achieve. And then I talked a little bit earlier about the relationships I established earlier when I started as director of product in my first couple weeks. And it helped me to get adoption of a lot of the things that we were trying to put across the company. When you introduce new processes, like I said, some people have a visceral reaction to change. Change is uncomfortable for a lot of people. And again, it's because it eats away at their time. It makes them think differently. They have to relearn something or they learn something new. But showing them that outcome was really critical to getting their buy-in and their alignment. And yeah, that helped us a ton. And team goals we'll talk about a little bit later on, I think, around how we're establishing or how we've established it today. But one other thing is a call out. If this is something that we're really lucky to have, my team and I consider myself fortunate that our Chief Product Officer, Brian, truly believes in the power that a solid product ops team has for an organization. He and I sat down and had lots of talks about building this team out last year. And when COVID hit, I mentioned it was a time when I was reflecting on all the things that happened for our team and the organization and where we wanted to take our team and what we wanted to focus on. We went through our wins, our losses, and we came up with a plan together that we felt was really solid for this quarter and beyond. And he views us as an arm of the product team that's here to serve our company, to serve Pendo, and not just here to work and execute and support. It means a lot when it comes to having someone represent you in leadership meetings, C-suite meetings, and helping to get your initiatives prioritized. So always having that, leadership view over your why is really important, and having them help sell your story across the organization.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's also interesting what you mentioned about the idea of starting small and iterating. I think that's something that's really important to call out, because obviously starting a new function or defining a team that maybe the work was already being done, but it just wasn't an official function, is a lot of work. So it's valuable to hear that it's important to start small and iterate as you go, and you don't feel like you need to have everything perfectly laid out at the beginning, because that's just not realistic and that might not be the best way to go about it. So I think that's super interesting. So similar question to the previous one, but product ops is such a collaborative function, as we've said, and you mentioned working with your different partners across the company as you got started. How did the rest of the organization adjust to having this product ops function to work with in the beginning?
Yeah, I think in short, we were pretty well received. There's a lot that we were able to pick up really quickly. And it was in part due to the fact that the two members that I brought onto my team right away also had relationships established within the organization and had built some trust and credibility over the years prior to me joining. And having some focus for them in this discipline helped a ton. So I think people adopted it really quickly because of, we have great people in place and we have great ideas to execute on. And again, showing people the why really helped a ton. So they also adjusted well because we were very clear on what we wanted to start to put our efforts towards. So establishing clear lines of responsibility on what you are going to be responsible for and what you're absolutely not touching was really critical. And I think that helps show that partnership element as well. And then we got, solid buy-in on some of the things that we were looking to make better. For example, the process to make the product team more aware of the customers that were potentially at risk and start to lift data around not only what dollar amount was at risk, but why those customers were at risk. Couple that with data that we have from our own product that we use feedback in our own product to manage a lot of the feedback that we get from our customers. Bringing that to the table with them or for the product team was really critical, and helping the product managers understand that story with all the data that we were being given was really important. And it showed the customer success organization, wow, there's somebody that's actually championing what we're championing for our customers here within the organization. Because, at times, like in any company, you get a sense at times that there's sort of this little gap, I think, between some folks that are customer facing and product managers, and it's not always perfect. There's always everybody's got a million things going on. So I think showing them where we were able to help fill the gaps with more data was really important. And yeah, I think answering your question, pretty well received. I think a little bit too well received at some point because we ended up getting asked to do a lot of different things. But we ended up being more intentional about those things. So.
Yeah, I think that is definitely something that is probably common with new product ops teams is, they're here to help in so many ways, but there's obviously only so much one team or one person can do. So it's really important to kind of narrow in on what you're going to do, what you're not going to do. Which leads me to my next question, you mentioned those core areas of focus for your team. Would love to hear what those are today.
Mm-hmm. I think I'll start by just kind of touching base on a couple of things that helped me get to those core areas, because I know some folks might want to think about that too before they just put some effort into figuring those out. We learned quickly where we were going to be of most value. Once again, discovery. We do a lot of that as product people, and we do a lot of it at Pendo. Even our revenue teams do that, on a day-to-day basis with customers and prospects. There are two things that I believe in when it comes to setting the goals for your team. And it's especially if you're a new team, right? If everything else around you is shifting and you're not looking at what you might need to do to adjust, you're never going to get better. You're never going to set your team up for success. And it's like tunnel vision, right? You have to make sure that you have a wide lens and you could think about how to get better all the time. The other thing is, I mentioned we got thrown a lot of things, and the second thing is you can try to do all the things, but you won't likely be able to do all the things very well. And so with that, you have to be able to pick your core areas of focus. And for us today at Pendo, for the product operations team, our core areas of focus, the things we focus on, are facilitating information flow between the teams here at Pendo, as I mentioned, between more revenue and the product team, and empowering that revenue team to really do their best at any given stage, whether they're selling, whether they're prospecting, whether they're demoing, it doesn't matter. We want them to feel that they're well armed. And then on the other side, empowering and enhancing the things that our product managers are already learning from our customers and the market, and making sure that that they have vision over all the things, right? Sometimes it's like, this feedback data is great, and I had a great meeting with a customer, but there's also like, ooh, we have to keep in mind this one other thing that might be coming up, right? And here's data backing why you need to potentially keep that in mind. So facilitating that information flow is really important. And again, we act as that sort of champion at times from the revenue team back to the product team. It's nice because we did a survey at the end of our first quarter asking the revenue teams, just getting some sentiment or some feel around how they feel we did representing their voice and giving them a seat at the product table. And that was an area where I didn't anticipate as high of a mark as we did, but they ranked us the highest there. So that was really cool to see. And that goes to gaining their trust too. And then the second area of focus is being hyper-focused on our product cleanliness. And that also includes being hyper-focused on our knowledge-based content. So we call it that, just product cleanliness overall, and making sure that we're, I don't want to say healthy. Cleanliness is probably the right consistent word right now. We have one person who's dedicated to putting some processes around naming conventions, around how we clean up our guides, around all of the reports that we have in Pendo. We dog food a ton here, right? So we have to make sure it's clean. And then we have another person focused solely on knowledge base. Well, not solely, sorry. She focuses on more than just knowledge base. We're actually going to be hiring in a writer, hopefully very soon, to help us focus a ton on knowledge base. So the third area is rigor, and that word means a ton. It's a small but mighty word, I always tell my boss. So we enforce rigor around process, and an example of where that's prevalent here is beta management, beta criteria, and making sure that there's clear things to be checked off. I don't want to call it check boxes, but I guess it is. Clear criteria for product teams to look at when they move from a closed beta to an open beta to GA. We started enforcing more rigor around that, and it's one of the core things that we're going to be focusing on this quarter, getting so much better on. We also focus a ton on reviewing customer feedback and helping to add more data to the product manager's toolkit around the things that they want to put into the app. And then also, like I mentioned, all the revenue data input. So that is all around rigor and process, because collecting all of that takes a ton of process and a ton of focus.
Yeah. So the last question I have that I think would be super valuable to hear from you, you mentioned you're looking to hire a writer, and just would love to hear, as you built the team, what skills or background were you looking for in product ops members?
Yeah. So One of our core values here at Pendo is maniacal focus on the customer. And so it's really important that somebody who has true customer love, at least for me, Pendo and Product Ops, that is evident in the person that we want to bring, or somebody that we potentially want to bring onto the team. Because at the end of the day, everything that we do on our team impacts the experience to our external customers. And that it makes you as a product ops person have more purpose, more clear purpose, because you're working day to day with internal teams to align them, to empower them, but your outcome is felt by your external customers. So they have to have that customer love and passion. So someone who looks for the problems is really important for me. And it's hard to see that off the bat, but I think we've crafted interview questions very carefully now where we can try to figure that out.
Yeah.
So it tends to skew to product people when you look for that skill, product managers in particular. Like I mentioned, I have 10 years worth of product experience at this point. And it's interesting being in this space now because I've been able to lean on these skills, like from problem identification to testing and iterating to launching processes, to driving communication. It's all part of being in the crazy world of product, but it first starts with what are the right problems that we have to solve? So looking for the problems is important. I think being thoughtful and really data-driven is really important. And they have to be able to absorb so much information that's coming at them at any given time, and help then quickly make a recommendation around, why or why not, or give a recommendation, I guess, on how to move forward, or answer why or why not we wouldn't be able to help with something at the moment. And cross-functional, I don't think I need to go into that. Our team is filled with people, if that makes sense. And again, I mentioned, they had established some really great relationships here. So I consider myself lucky in that respect, but at the very least, somebody who has the desire and a willingness to be really cross-functional, put themselves out there, is really important. And continuously look for new relationships to build and people to help drive their success in the organization, but also learn from, because we are just this constant loop of learning and spitting back out, learning and spitting back out. Empathy is probably another one. It's a big word in business. It's a big word in our world. I think companies like Pendo, we move so quickly and people fail to see what is going on around them or even across the aisle. And it's really important for people to pause and say, okay, especially today, right? In the world that we're in, we don't see it anymore. I don't get to look over and say, hey, Daniel, this, or hey, Erica, that. It's, we have to be just really conscious that people are going through a lot. And we in product ops have the advantage of sitting in the middle and seeing behind the scenes at time. And we can really help just build that empathy across the different groups. And then I will end, I think the last point is solid communicator. So that's a huge skill that's really important for my team. Again, it goes with the cross-functional aspect. We has opened up a dedicated tech writer role to help us in this. And it speaks volumes to a bunch of different things, but more so the importance of having a really solid external knowledge base and content program around how you empower your customers to do even more with what's in the product today. And they have to have a consistent written voice for the product, whether it's through our guides or our knowledge base. They have to be able to articulate the value in some way, shape, or form and how to get there. Your user base doesn't want to, nor should they have to wait for a meeting to quickly understand something, right? So having that skill, the communication skill, is really essential for us.
Yeah, that's super valuable to hear from you. And just following up and kind of as a extra tidbit, what we did see in that research we did with LinkedIn is, like you said, those harder skills like data analysis and the more technical aspect is important, but among the top 3 was that cross-functional leadership. So someone that can work cross-functionally and also have influence, not just, product ops is sitting between a lot of different teams and they're gonna be the ones making the calls and communicating that out. So I think it's interesting and important to call that out as well. So that brings us to our Q&A portion of the webinar.
Thanks so much, Christine and Sarah. Like Sarah said, we are in the Q&A portion. Remember, we are taking questions and you can use the Q&A button on the Zoom recording. And we are recording as well. So if you need to hop off, We will have this for you in 24 hours in your inbox. We did get a lot of questions, Christine. I think it's a hot topic and it's in a lot of people's minds how to scale efficiencies right now. So let's start with this one. Tell me a little bit, Christine, about what being product-led means for a product ops team, and what have you done to kind of show that you are product-led?
Yeah, that's such a hot topic, buzzwordy type thing going on today, right, Fanny? So I think for my team, we talk about it a lot. And I think for us, it's everything that we do contributes to an outcome, either for revenue teams around, making sure they feel empowered around training or articles, as I mentioned, or for our product managers being armed with so much more data around something that's shaping up for certain segments we cover, certain industries that we're covering. It all means that we entirely here, just thoroughly here at Pendo, have to keep our product at the core of what we do and ensure that everyone feels really good about what they're getting out of it. Whether it is the actual feature itself or whether it is something that they need to learn a little bit more about. So I mentioned guides before and how we position some of our training through that way. So for us, our customers experiencing Pendo itself through the app means product-led for my team in particular. And there's so much that goes into the product experience that we don't necessarily show via a feature through the product. And I think that today includes our product ops team. So again, feeling what we do externally is really critical and helps us to feel truly product-led.
Great. I think that's really awesome and definitely answers what that means for you. We did have various questions on tools that you're using. So talk a little bit about, as a product ops team, what is your tool stack? And also go into any framework for prioritization. So who owns that? And how do you guys go around managing all of these asks, right, from all these different departments?
Yeah. So first thing is, if it doesn't fall within the core 3 areas I mentioned, it falls below the line. So we have above the line and we have below the line. So if you're above the line, on a weekly basis, my team and I sit down and we go through, okay, what are the things that we're going through this week that's going to contribute to the goals that we have for this quarter for our team that ultimately roll back up into our product team's goals, right? That then ultimately roll back up into Pendo's goals. If there are asks that we're getting that are below the line, we sit down and we take a look and we say, does that feel like it's something that our team should own? I mentioned, the power to say no is really important. So if it's not something that we should own, we're very clear on the why. And we provide at times suggestions around where they can go to get some extra help. But there are things that we end up working on that are outside of our immediate core 3 areas. And those are probably once a quarter asks that we end up getting. You asked as well about the tools that we use for data analysis. Okay, so at Pendo, we use Pendo. So thankfully, we use Pendo. We use Looker to do, more visualizations around our data. We also are Salesforce users, so we get a lot of our account and user data out of Salesforce. And I think a lot of our customers share that same sort of setup. For prioritization, we use Miro. That's my team in particular. And we also use Miro for communication. So when we've established a new process that we want to try out, for example, it's hard for you to talk through it. It's easier for you to visualize and show that visually. So we use Miro to help us illustrate that. And we also use it for collaboration, particularly in this time of COVID. So that's been really good. And I would say Atlassian as well. So all of our internal documentation for more technical teams is stored on Confluence, and then our teams in general use Jira for prioritization.
Great, thanks, Christine. We've got a question here from a VP head of product. He says, I've often taken it upon myself to address many of the product ops needs on my team as part of removing barriers, etc. When do you think is the right time to start thinking about a dedicated person or a team, and what does such typically enable the head of product to focus more on?
Oh yeah, this is good. So last year, I mentioned I came in as director of product, and there was so much to be done. And again, it's because of where we were as Pendo at the time, and because we were growing so quickly, we brought in a head of product, a VP of product. And so he and I sat down and we said, at the time I was managing the product managers and a whole bunch of other things that traditionally fall under a director of product's responsibility pool. I sat with him and I said, hey, look, there's a lot more that I would love to do here that's a bit more cross-functional. What do you think about taking on the product managers, driving the product strategy and execution, and having me focus on more operational excellence out of the product team? And at the time, Brian, our CPO, was already talking to me about product operations. So I just put some more thought around what that would look like, and just kind of projected a little bit further out, given the growth that we were experiencing last year, where we would end up today, to help the entire product team be set up for success. So I think there are a couple of things there that helped me. One was we were growing rapidly. Two, we were trying to bring on more product managers to help with that growth. But three, there was also this need to ensure that we were arming all people internally with all the greatness coming out of the product team so that they can then externally speak really confidently to it. That sounded weird, but they were really confident around all the things that we were offering. And so rapid growth, lots of change, and then just as your customer base grows, it's a really good time for you to think about how you're setting up your teams here for success so that they can be successful.
Great, thank you. We've also gotten several questions. I'm just going to make it one ask on measurements of success, KPIs. So can you talk about what those metrics are for your team? And then if you want to go a step deeper here, and if you want to talk a little bit about what those look like as your team changes and grows. So maybe you do have different metrics. As you mentioned, you have different team members that are taking on different focuses of product ops.
Yeah, so being almost a year in, it's shifted for sure. And so because the product ops team is one of the core, I guess, areas of impact for us is to kind of put more process and rigor into place for the organization. It's hard for you to put numbers to that initially. So what we encourage is, when we think about taking on something new for the quarter, my team and I sit down and we talk about what are the milestones that we want to hit and what are the dates that we want to achieve something by. I know it's not good practice when it comes to KPIs and output or just more feature build, but it is working for our team when we think about making progress in aligning the organization around getting the things we need to be successful to the product team or vice versa. And so, an example is if we're building a new process, which we are building a new process around some of the feedback stuff that we have coming up this quarter, we set a milestone around agreeing on the process itself with the product team by X date. And then the next milestone is making sure that there's full-blown training that's executed on by the next date. There's some iteration between that, obviously, to make sure people feel comfortable. And then at the end of it, showing the value to our success org is going to be our next milestone. Then we can actually start to put some numbers around it. Like, how many things are we actually taking a look at? What is the result of those things that we're looking at more deeply? And that's how we're going to start to measure success. But if you're looking at first implementing change, you have to remember that change management aspect is really hard. So just milestones around getting there is going to be your first mark of success. And then finding your measurements are going to be really critical. And yeah, you're right. We do have different members on the team that are managing different things, Fanny. And so when we bring on this tech writer, for example, and they're fully up to speed on Pendo and all the things for onboarding, we've already started looking at numbers around number of knowledge-based documents that we want to update, number of documents that we want to add or remove, depending on the different product area. So that's where we can put some more hard numbers around things.
Great. I think that was really thorough and appreciate your examples there, Christine. And here's a question about the ebook. So in the ebook, we talked about phase 1, you start product ops as discovery, and then phase 2 is when you start identifying the priorities and putting things into action. If you are in that phase 1 of discovery and you're ready to start that product ops team, how do you start getting into phase 2 and identifying those priorities? And Sarah, feel free to also chime in with any of the research that you did for the ebook.
Yeah, so I will quickly say that, I keep saying this, and I know it sounds funny, but you have to make your relationships and you have to make them work for you. And this is just good business practice in general. If you're in a cross-functional team or running one, you have to make sure that that's going for you. You have to establish some areas of ownership and lines of division when you're doing your discovery. You're going from phase 1 and getting into phase 2, and then trying to set some milestones against the things that you want to achieve, right? The milestones are also, I'm going to actually hop back to that other question. I just thought of something. So there have been times where we've set milestones and we had to course correct. So this is a lesson learned, because again, adoption of a process that we're trying to roll out wasn't as smooth as we thought. And so you have to be agile enough to quickly pivot into something else and continue to show the value. And if it's not valuable, you have to be willing to accept that something is not valuable. So once you hit that certain point where you're like, okay, this is where I know my team and I are going to provide value, you align all the things that you are going to be working on to your product team's direction and goals. So again, we roll up into our CPO, we're aligned on all the things we're working on. And then ultimately the company's direction and goals. And, new teams are often the ones with the most focused lens on them. And there's a lot of companies that are looking hard at their staff overall today, right? So you want to always make sure that you're being intentional about how and where you place your efforts once you've established who and what. That's what I would say moves you over to phase 2, is you get your people. What is it saying? It's first who, then what. And so you have your people, you establish your relationships, and now what is it that you're going to do to make an impact?
Yeah, and I would just add some more to what you said, Christine, earlier in our discussion, just that idea of starting small, getting something out there, and then iterating. I think these phases could also be thought of that way too. They're not necessarily like, all right, I'm done with phase 1, like move on, never look back. It should be kind of an ongoing, loop of like discovery, putting things into practice, opening up those communication channels, and then seeing what's working and what maybe needs to be revisited via, more discovery, more conversations to then kind of move you forward. So I think it's similar to what you're saying about being agile. You can maybe even think of those phases as like, you keep doing them over and over again, but they maybe build and grow to be different, scopes.
Great. Thank you both. We have a question around justifying cost for a product ops team. So maybe Christine, if you can talk a little bit about how do you justify the cost of a product ops team to your exec team, and even, taking up to the board? Are there bottom line targets that your product ops team is specifically either responsible for or you want to influence?
Yeah, we are not responsible for bottom line targets today, at least. There's impact that we have to helping to make sure that at-risk customers are saved, for example. So that's one of the things that we tie some of our success to, is making sure that we're getting enough data to lift those folks from a yellow or potentially red state into the green. And then also, where can the product team overall, and when I say we, I want to make it clear that's also the product team, right? So the product operations team is there front and center facing the revenue teams on a day-to-day basis and collecting that data, making sense of it, and making sure that it's escalated if need be, so that we can move quickly, right? And the team is already being as agile as they possibly can be. So on retention, that's a huge thing. If there's an area of opportunity for our current customers where we're sensing a new trend and we have some data to back it from our interactions with the revenue team, that's another area where we're like, hey, listen, this is something that could potentially put us into a whole other category. Let's try to get that faster over to the team and have them make that decision. And the other thing too is when you look at gaining that new business, our team is part of that. It's that first level of process that we get to getting either product roadmap discussion, product thought leadership, any of the really good things that people want to hear out of Pendo during the deal cycle. It comes to us first, and making sure that that we're putting a lens over it that makes sense, finding the right folks. So helping to lift the deal over the line is something that we also contribute to as an overall team, right? You had a part of that question that I may not have answered. And then the other side of it, I think, is showing the value externally without actually facing the customer is really interesting. And that goes to all of the written assets that we have to put together for our customers and arming them really well with how to get on Pendo, how to get started the right way without actually having any sort of formal training before they hit any sort of professional services content. This is part of what we do today. So it contributes to the impact that we have overall on customers, and then saving customers and getting things over the line.
Great, thank you. We had a few people ask about the difference of the product ops team versus product management. So if you could give us a few examples of tasks that your product ops team isn't responsible for, and the ones that maybe your team has taken on that product no longer has responsibility for, to kind of form a distinction between the two.
Yeah. When we talk about process, like the beta process, for example, one of the things that we focus on is rigor around beta and making sure that certain things are checked off. So we're not responsible for executing on feature build. We are responsible for making sure that things feel ready, right? Both internally and externally. So we've put together some really solid templates through partnership with some of the product managers as well around getting certain getting bits of information ready for our marketing team so that they can start to prep assets both for sales and then external customers. We also take on the training. So when it comes to technical trainings, we do that today. And that's alleviated some of the lift on our product managers in particular. So that's been really good. So that's, I think, the clearest example is when we talk about getting from a state of probably internal launch. If you go through the entire cycle here at Pendo, one full cycle would be internal only to closed beta to open beta to GA. And sometimes we skip that depending on the tier of the release that we're going to be doing. But we help manage that effectively. We help make sure that the communication is crystal clear to our customer success organization, that they feel prepared to speak to customers, that they understand the ins and outs of things if something is going to work in some instance, but not. For example, we're the ones helping to communicate all of that so that the product managers are refining and taking care of all the things they need to do to check the box to make the feature ready.
Great. Appreciate that response. And we're going to do 2 more questions. So Christine, talk to me about what the team's role product ops is when it comes to betas.
I think I just covered that.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, you did. I'm so sorry. I completely missed that. Let's skip that and let's go to, I was reading down the list, of course, and I looked at the next one and you had already answered that. So let's go into how your team works with product design and UX. So we had a person ask about how you influence the UX team, and you talked about how product ops collaborates with a lot of different teams. So
yeah, that's a good question. So we've historically helped them recruit folks for either design sessions or betas or quick tests when it comes to testing a new flow. Because we're working so close with the customer success team, we help identify whether somebody is a clean candidate or a good candidate so that they can quickly do a reach out and see if something that they're working on is going to be something that they want to push forward with the product team or product manager. So that's one thing. And let's see, what are the other things that we end up doing with those folks? Oh, there's a big one. We use the product so much. I mentioned the cleanliness aspect of the product and having somebody focus on that. We're often we're often at times, I think, I'm trying to word that right. They come to us first for testing stuff out internally. So they want to know if something feels right when it comes to a change that they want to make in the app, or if they're testing a flow. So they'll come to us and say, hey, how does this feel? How does it look? Do you think we're ready to start maybe putting this out? We've gotten just like a gut check. So we become sort of a gut check on that before they go any further.
Great, thank you. And all right, we're going to wrap it up here with the last question. And talk to me about standing meetings. What is the product ops meeting culture like, and what meetings do you have with other teams as well?
Sure. Product ops standing meetings. We have a weekly product ops sync in which we hold each other accountable for 3 items or less. It's 3 items a week at the very least of focus. And so I've gone over my 3, I think once or twice, and I've gotten slapped on the wrist. So we have a very open back and forth between me and my product ops managers. we keep each other honest, I would say. So we go through what we're working on, we go through what we're focusing on next week. I mentioned that we make sure we're tracking towards our quarterly goals, and we ask each other for advice on how to handle any particular situation we might be going through. Again, cross-functional teams. Sometimes it comes up where you're going to need to lean into something to explain and why not, and that happens during that meeting as well. We also make sure that we are aligned on the things we're going to be communicating internally, so that we can then either partner with product marketing or prepare them for what they need to do externally. And that's one meeting we have. I have one-on-ones with my directs every week, so that's something that's not going away. That's our health check, and that's your priority check. That's your health check. That's your chance to check me. 360 bi-directional feedback is what I want there. The product managers, we have a weekly stand-up with them. So we've split our time. We actually used to have this really long meeting where we would go through everything. We found that some of the things were not relevant for others, and so we don't want them to lose focus, and we want them to get their time back. So meeting culture is important in making sure we keep it down. So we are intentional about the time we put on their calendars. It's no more than a half an hour. It's a quick touch base. Sometimes it's over in 10 minutes. Sometimes it takes a half hour, on the things we're hearing from the team, the revenue teams that are of the utmost importance for them. It's a reminder for them to check in on the feedback that we're getting in certain areas. And it's their communication method for us around the things that they need our help on communicating out to the org and potentially out to customers with knowledge base on. I would say those are the three. And then we also, obviously, as part of the product team, have our all hands on a weekly basis with the product team where we do our normal check-in.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It's going to do it for the Q&A. Again, thank you to our listeners for tuning in, and Christine and Sarah, lots of good insight. I think you gave a lot of tactical things also to put in practice. As a reminder, this webinar is recorded and we will be emailing it to you here in the next 24 hours. In that email, you'll also get a link to download the newest Product Ops ebook, which we touched on and Sarah worked on, and also give you a way to connect with Christine Itwaru, our head of Product Ops. Give you all her LinkedIn link. You asked a lot of questions and she'll be happy to answer them to you. So once again, thank you guys so much and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.